I am really pleased this morning to be joined by Sarah Dunn. Sarah, thanks for giving up your time to come along and answer these questions.
Absolute pleasure.
So before we dive in and go through the questions, just to give a bit of insight to people listening in terms of your background. So, I mean, you've had a wealth of senior marketing leadership roles. You're a very well experienced B2B marketer, specifically in tech. And I know that more recently, interim and now really looking at kind of career interim senior marketing leadership roles going forward. And some of the companies you've worked with have been absolutely fascinating. So, fairly recently for Tero, you previously were the senior director for EMEA marketing for Aruba, which is a Hewlett Packard business. And then it's just a list of mega brands: O2, BlackBerry, Apple, Microsoft. So really impressive background. Looking forward to hearing about your career journey, what's kind of got you to this point. So I guess it's probably the best place to start. Let's kick off, if you wouldn't mind, by giving some insight into your kind of career journey to date and any standout moments along the way.
Yeah, happy to. And, thank you for asking me. Delighted to be here. And hopefully can provide some insights for folks. So I've worked consistently in technology marketing roles, and I have found myself in those companies at pivot points when businesses have needed to adapt to change. And so a couple of examples would be, we cast our minds back when, consumer digital technology was taking off, and we all had a digital music player, a digital camera, digital video recorder. We all had three independent devices. And, when I was working for Apple, it became apparent that Apple saw that content was the future, and software was the common ground. And my time at Apple really taught me a couple of two key things. It was that the impact a unified customer and consumer experience could have, because they created software that joined up all of the output of these digital devices. But also, and one of the biggest takeaways for me is just the power of a clear, concise, consumable brand. It's known the world over, and it was much more niche when I was there. I say quite a while ago now, but the lessons remain the same and they stay with me. I think that whole thread of consumer experience and customer experience has been a common ground. So when I moved to BlackBerry, they were expanding out of B2B and into consumer, and I launched retail channels for them, as well as B2C, B2B, B2C even propositions at a time when mobile email was becoming mainstream off the back of their B2B success. So this whole idea of your email in your pocket became something tangible to everyday people. And then, thinking about changes in the software industry, as SaaS provisioning emerged, I was at Symantec at the time, and that presented a pivot point for them, and not least for the EMEA campaign strategy that I was leading at the time, to evolve from that very classic B2B execution into something much more digital first, customer orientated, and always on. And so that was a significant move to both digital execution, but also the introduction of that MarTech technology, those MarTech stacks that we kind of assume now, but at the time were quite transformative, because they gave a visibility and a delivery to marketing that was tangible for probably the first time, in B2B, in a way that would then power relationships with stakeholders internally and also give greater insights to improve marketing. So it was quite a time of change, as that SaaS model came on board. And you mentioned HP. I was at HP when COVID hit, and I learned, as we all did, a very sharp lesson in adapting to market forces. And we, through necessity, obviously, we developed messaging that was much more simple and empathetically led, to provide relevance rather than look for commercial value at a crisis point for many businesses. And I think, the strength of the brands that, you talk about these brands that I've worked for, the strength of those brands has always given me a real fire for and a passion for brands and the impact that they can have, because they're about making connections, and that's where I thrive. And so, when you have highly invested stakeholders supporting a rebrand, it's a marketer's dream. And I was fortunate when I was at Fortero to have very strong stakeholder support. And I worked very closely with the CEO on that rebrand, where we took 12 product lines effectively and formed them into a master brand under one Fortero name and a company brand, which, was hugely rewarding. And then, even now, I look at it and with a warm smile as, work done and work achieved. But the takeaway is so much that a clear, comprehensive and differentiated brand accelerates performance as much as, strong demand generation execution. And my position has always been that it's very much two sides of the same coin. It's never been an either or, brand or demand. It's like, your perfect storm is a combination of the two.
And am I right to think that you've now very much focusing on more of an interim career, so taking that wealth of knowledge and working in the sector and kind of everything you've learned within kind of B2B tech and implementing that on an interim basis. In my experience as a headhunter, strategy is often a fairly big part of these interim roles, and you've got masses of experience of that. Have you found that that's been really helpful, kind of taking your strategic experience into those interim roles?
Yeah, I have, because I think strategy is one of those things that, you can learn it in a textbook, but until you do it in a live environment, you don't really build the muscles for it. And I think having worked in a, albeit tech orientated but diverse range of companies, because every company is different, the way that you work in that company to build a strategy, to align marketing with business goals, to deliver results and establish marketing as a business partner is your sort of your table stake. And then it's what are those situations, what are those circumstances in the business that you draw on and that you work with to form the right marketing strategy for that business. And, I think very much it starts with what the business needs to achieve. And you work out from there. And I think the most successful and impactful strategies that I've been responsible for have been those developed in partnership, rather than thinking about, what does marketing need to do? Of course, there's marketing delivery, but the strategy has to encompass everything that business needs to achieve. So, marketing must be in alignment. They have to digest market data, business insights, research, see if, what the business needs to achieve is viable for marketing to make a contribution to. And sometimes, that means being a little bit brave and being a positive challenger to some of that business strategy. But it's key to establish what marketing can and cannot contribute, and depends on so many different resources. And that experience allows you to accelerate that process so much more quickly. You become far more adept at looking at a situation and thinking, we've got softness here, which, where we really need strength. Is there somewhere else in the business that we could bring in or rotate a skill set? Is there an update to a particular piece of software or a tool that would amplify what we're trying to do? And you just build those muscles really to assess where strengths and opportunities and soft points are that allow you to optimize that strategy, because the strategy is all very well, but it has to turn into something that's executable, actionable. And I think one of the roles of marketing is in partnership with sales, but is to be the biggest advocate of the customer, or the audience. They don't have to be customers already. It's like, because that getting closer to them is the point of marketing, and getting closer to them in the right way that brings relevance and ultimately revenue to your business, fuels determines what your strategy needs to do, and how your strategy is formed. So I think the experience of doing it allows you to sharpen it, but I think there's also something in the delivery of a strategy, because I've seen and and had to work with strategies that have sort of been sat in a box on a shelf, and they should be living things. And a multi-year strategy broken into annual and quarterly goals is much more easily digested. It sets expectations, and it's cumulative, and it allows you to evolve it as the market changes, which is happening all around us, as we see day in, day out. So longer answer probably to a succinct question, but I think you build the muscles as you go.
And presumably those are skills that you've learned through kind of your kind of wealth of experience over the years. To your point, the strategy needs to be living and active within the business, broken down into clearly defined goals. And when you're coming in to do those roles on an interim basis, I mean, the leadership piece is always important, but arguably amplified within an interim scenario where the expectation not just to write the strategy, but to deliver within a defined time frame. So what are your kind of learnings, or what are your tips maybe in terms of how you lead what would be a new team to you as you're going into these interim roles?
Yeah, it's a great question, because you don't have, with an interim approach to it, you don't have the established relationships. You don't have any of the, if you like, the soft currency that you do when you're in-house. And so I think it's and every opportunity is different for sure, but I think there are some common sort of ground rules, and that starts with communication. And I know it's a common answer to so many questions, but there's a reason, because it's communicate, multiple formats, repetition, because you're going to be talking to an immediate team and working with an immediate team, but they also, they will also have other relationships, and they need to be explaining what they're doing as part of the strategy. And so you have to equip other people to communicate, as well as just present your perspective and your strategy to them. It's communicating to enable, it's communicating to inspire action, and to make it possible for the work to be done. And then a lot of that, I think, you do by balancing a mixture of both human and commercial objectives, because all businesses need to achieve positive results. Let's just say they'll be different for every business, but businesses are here to grow and to be successful. And so you can't take your eye off what the commercial is, and you need to have very clear KPIs and goals about what marketing is going to contribute to that, which again are part of your communication. But there is a human side to how are we going to do this? And that, I think, is paramount in any organization, in any team, but especially when you're doing interim work, because you're the newbie. You're somebody that's come in that people are sort of looking at and going, okay, what's going to happen here? And that the how you do it and how you work with people, it's about bringing them along the journey. People need to feel that they're a part of something, and they need to feel that collective success is both achievable and will be recognized and acknowledged. Excuse me. And I think the thing that I've learned, that you have to be accessible, but not necessarily always available, because there is one of me, and I'm going in to do a very specific piece of work. And so accessible, yes, but not always available. Otherwise, I'm never going to get the work done, and that balance as well, especially when you are, new into an organization, to a project, you kind of have to watch yourself a little bit there. And so in terms of how you invest your time and energy. And so the last thing I would say is, once you've got the measure of the dynamic of the team and the group that you're working with, there's an element of delegation and empowering, which, for me is an ongoing work in progress, because I like this work, right? And it energizes me, and I get very enthusiastic. But we are all finite, and people need to be allowed to do the work themselves.
And that makes me question now, given the experiences that you've had, because that's a really good point, what other tips might you have for other senior leaders who are considering interim, who are looking at you now, and kind of how you made that move into interim? Any tips when you're going into your first interim role? Anything you can share around that would be really helpful for people listening.
Yeah, of course, happy to. I think that one of the key things is being open-minded, and I ask myself a lot of questions about moving from into a different way of working, and what I've found to be really helpful is to kind of leave all your preconceptions at the door, and that's hard. It's easier said than done, but it's because you have to be open to experience and you have to be greedy for experience, and not everything will be in an obvious package. Not everything will look like the day rate you might like to ask for. Not everything will look like a straight continuation of work that you've done. Not everything will be an obvious continuation of a segment or a market or an industry that you've worked in. But if you want to work like this, you have to be open-minded and invest time in exploring. You can still say no, and you can still decide what is and isn't for you, but you must be open to exploration. Otherwise, you won't have a broad enough view to be able to generate pipeline and business, because you are your own engine if you work like this.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really important. I can think of situations whereby I've said no to things in my career, and in hindsight, they would have opened doors for me. Now, different doors open and so on, but not too many, thankfully. But certainly working like this, you have to embrace it. And I think you also have to decide what you're going to champion, right?
Yeah.
So for me, it is about connections. That's my driver, if you like. It's what connection can we possibly make with that customer to differentiate our proposition, to make that customer, that audience, think about us. So I thrive on connections, and I know that's what matters to me. I think you've got to find the thing that kind of puts a fire in your belly a little bit, that you're going to champion, because we have to face the fact that marketing is having some hard yards right now, and there are a lot of people on the market, in the market, doing marketing. And the good news is there's lots of marketing work to be done in companies. It's just maybe formatting itself or showing up in different ways. And so interim can be a great solution for businesses that maybe aren't ready to make a commitment to a full-time senior marketing leader. But how you add value, how you differentiate, you are your own product, and you have to show up as that product. And just like any brand, as I was saying earlier, you need to be consistent, you need to be consumable, and memorable. And so that is why that the thing that really lights you up needs to be something that you talk about with a very positive and easy and enthusiastic way. And I think the last thing I would say on it is that you refine your experience and your focus as you go forwards. So like most things, you have to start somewhere, and don't worry if it's just a little bit of work, or it's something part of something bigger. It's like, just go and start, because your focus and how you want this to work will evolve as you do more work. So it's that you've got to do it to build the muscles. I'm all about building the muscles, and I think that's what you focus on. And the doing what you enjoy, that my point about what lights you up, will be more rewarding to you if you're going to work like this than anything else. And don't worry about the status, don't worry about the day rates, don't worry about the titles. Go and find the work that you really like doing, and just go and do it with people.
Oh, brilliant answer. And you can see your passion, Sarah, just kind of comes through on that. Um, we're going to finish off with a question about mindset and positivity, and it's no great surprise that everyone takes part on our Q&A is by nature, I think, fairly kind of positive characters. But do you have any kind of rituals or habits that you'd be able to share that enable you to maintain that positivity, the resilience that we require within the work that we do?
Mm.
Any tips that you could share?
Yeah, happy to. And I've tried, numerous different things and different ways of working, different practices. And what it really comes down for me is that I have two sort of leading principles. And one is about activity and being active in terms of my own lifestyle. So, fresh air is really important to me. I walk every morning, rain or shine, because it's how I wake my brain up. And my brain is different when I don't do that. Everything is harder. And so, but it's active mentally as well as physically, in that I like to do a variety of things. And working like this gives you that opportunity, because you have a much more diverse environment that you work in, because you work with different people in different businesses on different opportunities. But aside from just work, I like doing different things because it keeps my brain stimulated, engaged, and I find that builds my energy and that builds my resilience. And coupled, to say, with being physically active as well, the whole thing kind of makes the engine work. And the second thing is about being intentional with my time, which sounds a little bit grand and it's not meant to, and it's definitely a work in progress. But it's realizing that I get to choose and need to consciously choose what to spend my time on, so that I'm using my most valuable commodity on things that matter to me. And, I don't mean, the big things. I mean, in a day, we've got a finite number of hours to use to do things. So what actually matters today? And those are the things that are important. And it is being intentional with how I use my time, because it's also quite easy when you work like this to, you could lose a couple of hours doing, research, and actually you really haven't achieved very much. So what actually are you going to do? And how are you going to use what I say is your most valuable commodity?
Oh, brilliant. Sarah, thank you. I'm very grateful. I know that'll be really well received by our audience.
Very welcome.
Absolutely
Pleasure.
brilliant. I'm not surprised you're so successful in what you do. You've got great energy. And as I say, thank you very much for joining.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much, Suzie.